Hey guys, it's the Rain Man. Just want to do a raindrop today to give my take on what's been going on throughout the country over the last couple of weeks. Primarily want to touch on the rioting that has been sort of taking over the protests that were initially for George Floyd. I want to kind of talk a little bit about how I feel that's been completely hijacked, and that and the original intent of those protests has basically taken a backseat to what we're seeing on the news right now in places like Portland, Seattle, Austin, St. Louis, etc. Also want to just touch a little bit on the whole defund the police movement, as well as at this point in what's going on out there, just how important I feel the Second Amendment is, and private gun ownership is, especially in the chaotic times that we're living in right now. And then finally, just want to give my quick take on a great YouTube interview that Joe Rogan did with Ben Shapiro last week on the Joe Rogan Experience. It was just a great interview. So probably just spend a couple of minutes at the end, talk a little bit about that. First of all, in terms of the rioting and the protesting that we're seeing out there, one of the main problems that I have, obviously aside from the actual violence that is taking place on the streets right now, one of the main problems I have is with primarily with the politicians and the news media. Depending on what side of the aisle you are on, you might not be aware that there are actually violent agitators mixed in with the peaceful protesters. The news outlets basically are calling the entire thing a peaceful protest, and they're coming down on the side of the quote-unquote peaceful protesters against the police and how the police are reacting to the violence that's occurring on the streets. My personal take is if we really wanted to be truthful, and if people really want to solve the problem, you have to differentiate between what is going on out there and peaceful protests, what was originally intent as a peaceful protest. You are not seeing peaceful protests in the middle of the night when they're trying to tear down and burn down federal court buildings in downtown Portland in particular. I mean, that is just not a peaceful protest. That's a flat-out riot. And when politicians like Jerry Nadler say things like he did the other day, basically saying that when the guy asked him what he thought of the violence and the chaos that was happening in the streets of Portland, basically Nadler said that that's a myth that's been made up down in D.C. So right there it shows that they're either completely oblivious to what's going on, which I don't think is the case, or there is some level of condonement to what is actually happening on the ground. If they don't have the ability to disconnect the two entities from the peaceful protests to the agitators and the chaos and the riots that ensue, then there really is no way to even solve that problem if you can't even make that distinction. And then, quite frankly, I'm of the opinion that they don't want to solve the problem. This is actually somehow forwarding whatever political agenda they think that it may help. Now, unfortunately, when that happens, who are the people that get hurt the most? And that is the law-abiding citizens, which is the vast majority of us out there. I don't even know what it must be like to either live or work or try to work down around the federal building in Portland. I can't imagine there's anything going on right there in terms of lawful commerce and just people trying to live their lives. But inevitably, those are the people who get really hurt when things like this happen, when there's lawlessness on the streets. Now, I have a brother who is a police officer. I have several friends who are police officers and first responders, so I'm a big fan. Everybody knows that by now, or you should. And so when I hear politicians and city officials talking about defund the police, to me, my take is that's one of the craziest things you could do, especially in an environment like this. because as soon as lawlessness takes over, it inevitably trickles down into the areas of a city where they need the police the most. Now, getting back to the original reason why these protests started with the police brutality, the George Floyd murder, everybody is in agreement that was an abomination, and that that officer should be and hopefully will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I do agree that there are reforms that are needed in the police. Getting rid of the police entirely, that to me just seems crazy, and the people that are proposing that, in my view, are just pandering to the base level of agitation within those movements. Now, I'll go even a step further and talk a little bit about the whole Black Lives Matter, which is what originally started all this. That movement, I feel, has been completely hijacked, and you know, you get scenes like Portland, Oregon, where they're protesting up until about 11:30, and then a small number of those people who are actually the peaceful protesters leave, and then whatever's remaining, those are not peaceful protesters. Those are the people that the anarchists, and they want to tear the system down. And when that is allowed to happen, just the whole civil society, whole law and order of a civil society just breaks down, and we can't have that. The only way that this society operates as a free society is if people willingly obey the laws and order and civil conduct, and we're just not seeing that right now with these rioters. And then when you throw on top of that city officials or politicians that actually want to do away with the police, defund them, that's just going to make the matters worse, in my opinion. So I am all for the maintaining of law and order, especially in what we see going on out there. And I hope that law and order does win the day, because it's I find it heartbreaking to watch this, and to watch people actually are promoting this. People in positions of political power are actually promoting this type of chaos, and that to me is just crazy. In terms of the Second Amendment and our right to defend ourselves and our property, I just bring to your attention that episode a couple weeks ago in St. Louis, where that couple in their private gated community, the couple was outside and they were being filmed basically defending their property from a large mob that was in the process of marching to protest in front of the mayor of St. Louis's house. And what I find fascinating is that they were going to protest her for not wanting to defund the police. I believe that was the focus of the protest. Now, obviously, they were trespassing. They did personal property damage to that neighborhood. According to the gentleman and his wife that were defending their homes, there was a huge mob of people. They said upwards of 500, very threatening in their conduct and what they were saying to them. And in my view, if the police are not allowed to do their jobs and protect these people, what other venue does a individual have to protect themselves and their family and their property than a gun? So that was when I saw that, I felt as a person who owns a gun for self-defense, that to me is the reason why you would want that. And especially in a day and age where politicians are actually actively talking about defunding the police, inevitably crime in those areas are going to go up. And if people can't rely on the police to defend themselves, who are they going to rely on besides themselves? So I thought that was a heartening thing to see, that people were actually using their constitutional rights to defend themselves. What I didn't like seeing was the fact that the city attorney for St. Louis actually pressed charges and wanted to charge that couple with felonies for protecting themselves. And so what you have here just seems to be a crazy perfect storm where the city is actually seems to be, whether overtly or by omission or commission, they seem to be actively behind the protesters and the rioters and not law and order. And so the city's operating in that manner, and then when somebody actually takes their defense of themselves and their own property into their own hands, the city is going to want to punish them. Now, thankfully, I don't believe that's going to go anywhere, and one of the main reasons why, which I find incredible, is that the city attorney was accused by the judge of tampering with evidence. And what I mean by that is apparently when the guns were taken into custody by the police, the handgun that the wife was holding actually would not fire, would not operate. And in order for the city attorney's charges to stick, they would have to have proven that that gun was actually capable of firing lethal force. And as it turns out, the way the gun was put together, and I have to assume that this was done intentionally, is that the firing pin and the firing pin spring were actually put in backwards, so it was actually impossible for the weapon to actually fire. What the city attorney did was told the investigators or the lab workers to disassemble the gun and then reassemble it with the firing pin in the correct position, so that she could accuse them of actually brandishing a weapon that could work and could provide lethal force. So not only was she trying to persecute law-abiding citizens, she was actually tampering with the evidence to make those charges stick. Because in my view, I don't see any judge ever ruling against that couple's right to defend themselves. So, which to me is one of the principal tenets of being an American and living in this Constitution. So, the idea of defunding the police, the idea of the Second Amendment, I think all those things are coming into play here in these cities, and we're seeing it all over the country. And I think in the areas where they're actively trying to defund the police, just crime is spiking in those areas, and that should come as no surprise to anybody. But it is amazing to watch these mayors of these cities where the violence is spiking due to their desire to reduce the influence of the police, that try to listen to them explain why that's happening. To me, I find that fascinating, and an exercise in total doublespeak. So I'll finish off the raindrop with just a comment on the Ben Shapiro interview that Joe Rogan did on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. It was last week, and it sounds like those two guys are really good friends. They're on completely opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of their politics. Ben Shapiro, as I'm sure you all know, is a very conservative voice out there, and Joe Rogan is more of a libertarian, liberal. So he was basically taking the far left position on the conversation about race and about what's going on in these cities. And it was a really good discussion. And so I highly recommend you check it out. Just YouTube it. It was really, I found it really informative. Basically, two guys who know what they're talking about having a very good discussion about it. And a couple of things that stuck out in my mind that kind of wraps into this whole defund the police and the rioting that's going on and all that sort of thing. At one point, Joe asks Ben, "Hey, so if you were king for a day, what would you do to make South Chicago?" To try to turn South Chicago around. And the first thing that Ben said was, I would just load that place up with police to keep law and order. And that seems to me to be an obvious first step, because the vast majority of people in places like that are law-abiding citizens, and they're just trying to peacefully go about their business, go about their lives, and it is impossible to do that when there is a lawless or a sense of lawlessness within that area, because inevitably in a vacuum of lawlessness, what takes over? Gangs, chaos, anarchy, and it's very difficult to have a stable, healthy environment in that type of situation. Now, obviously, there's a lot more going on in South Chicago, South side of Chicago, that needs to be addressed as well. But when the mayor was asked why the South Side is such a troubled area, literally the first thing she said was that there's too many guns there. Well, yeah, but the point is that is one of the biggest gun-controlled cities in the United States. So, she's not doing anything to try to solve the problem. She's just blaming it on guns, which, according to the laws of that city, should not be there in the first place. So I find it a little bit frustrating when you hear these mayors try to explain away what's going on, and then even some of these politicians, like I had mentioned earlier, actually talking like what you're seeing on TV is not actually happening. And just to backtrack here real quick, when I heard Nadler make that comment about it's just a myth being made up by DC, the first thing that came to my mind was during the invasion of Iraq in 2003, when the news were interviewing, or there was a big press conference with one of the leading Ba'ath Party officers in Saddam's army, and he was basically telling them that the Iraqis have got the situation completely in hand, and the Western press is asking him, hey, you know that there are U.S. troops and coalition troops actually in Baghdad right now. And the guy's like, no, they're not. He was basically just his reality, or what he was trying to portray as the reality, was completely opposite of what was going on the ground. And it just, you realize that these guys are so wedded and so attached to their agenda that they're just blind to realities, or they're just flat out lying. Whatever it is, those are definitely not good positions to have, and that's exactly what Nadler reminded me of when he made that comment. So, getting back to the Rogan Shapiro interview, so I found that the point that he made about the increase in law enforcement in those areas, I thought that was a great point. One of the things that really came to my mind as I was listening to the two of them talk was, I would love to know, and I don't really know where to find it. I have looked on the internet. They don't mention it at all in the news, but there are, and especially during the NFL football season, you are always seeing those commercials for, if you want change, you got to be change, and they're showing the NFL players, in particular. The commercial I'm thinking of right now is in the South Side of Chicago. You got these NFL football players who are going down there, doing some community outreach to try to promote some type of role model and some type of positive influence in these really hard-hit cities. And the way they were doing it was with the police department, with black cops, black athletes, talking with young black kids. And I thought that was really cool, because I think that's one of the things that is missing in that environment, is positive role models, and that's one of the things that Joe Rogan was saying. But my thought was I wish I knew, and I wish there was somewhere that we could see if those programs are effective, because if they are effective, in my view, I would love to see more professional athletes in every big city in America, football, baseball, basketball, all doing those type of outreach programs. And I think that could hit a lot of people, and I think that could go a long way in projecting some kind of a positive voice and a positive story for these places, while the politicians are trying to figure out how to make these things better. So Those are my take. That's the raindrop for today. I just wanted to kind of get it off my chest, how I've been feeling about watching these cities on the news, these trends of wanting to make the country less safe than more safe. And unfortunately, again, this is my take only, it's the rhetoric and the scenes are probably going to get more crazy as we get closer to the presidential election. So I'll be keeping a very close lookout on that, and praying for the best, and hopefully things don't descend too far away where we won't be able to salvage that. So that is the raindrop for today. This is the Rain Man. I appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you soon.